What's going on, everybody? This is Sean of Raw Select Music. Today I want to talk about this record right here. This is Freddie Gibbs and Madlib, Pinata, released on Madlib Invasion in 2014. This was a record that I've wanted to review for a very long time. Back when I first started my WordPress blog in 2015, I started writing a review for this, but ultimately, for whatever reason, I ended up abandoning it, and I have not come back to it until recently. And largely with the release of their follow-up record, Bandana, I've started listening to this record again, and I really felt like I wanted to share my thoughts and opinions of this record and let you know why I think this is one of not only Madlib, but Freddie Gibbs' best projects, and why I do consider it to be something of a modern-day classic. So with that little introduction out of the way, let's talk about this guy. So part of the reason that I found this record really hard to review is most of what I want to say about this record probably has already been said by somebody else. I think that Freddie Gibbs is in top form on here, and I think it's pretty incredible that he manages to flow so effortlessly over Madlib's production, and Madlib himself is in absolute top form on this record. This record, to me, features some of Madlib's best production outside of his absolutely seminal, untouchable Mad Villainy project. So now that I've basically said what everybody else has already said about this record, I do think there are some nitty-gritty points that I can get into, and that's why I figured I'd do a review of this record. But first, I guess I should do a little bit of an introduction for those who may not know who these two are, although I'd be really surprised if you didn't know at this point. Freddie Gibbs is a rapper from Gary, Indiana, who started building a buzz back in the beginning of the 2010s and has only seen his visibility and fame rise over the course of this decade. And I still think that of all the rappers that have been coming out in this decade, I think Freddie Gibbs is definitely one of my favorite rappers, which says a lot because honestly, these days, there aren't many MCs that I really pay attention to. But anytime that Freddie Gibbs drops a project, I find it always worth at least checking out. A lot of my continuing interest in Freddie Gibbs post-Pinata have been as a result of this record. And Madlib, as a producer, I don't know what to say about him that hasn't already been said. But for those who may not know, he's a producer from Oxnard, California, and has quite possibly one of the most impeccable resumes in hip-hop production out there. He's always consistently interesting, he's insanely prolific, and probably has more music than any sane human being would know what to do with. And his career actually extends quite a few years. Some of his earliest production actually goes all the way back to the late 1980s, mostly starting with the early 1990s. But Madlib has largely been known for his quirky, off-kilter, very unique to him production style. One thing that I think is really interesting about Madlib's production is how much it's changed over the years. Go back and listen to some of his production work with the Luke Pack or the Alcoholics, and it was definitely more of a straightforward boom-bappy sound, albeit with a Madlib twist to it. I find actually a lot of more recent Madlib productions that it's actually very much like he's being the torch bearer for J Dilla and basically continuing the sound that Dilla became famous for after the release of Donuts. With a lot of his production post B Conductor Volume 5 and 6, it seemed like Madlib was going in the direction of doing a lot of soul chopping and doing it very much in Dilla's style of a lot of long loops, a lot of short loops, a lot of little cut-ups here and there, and sometimes just taking the best parts of a record and looping it. Don't get this twisted. Madlib by no stretch of the imagination is biting Dilla's style, but I do feel like there's a lot of parallels between Madlib's production through the 2010s and a lot of what Dilla was doing on Donuts back in 2006. But that sort of breakdown of Madlib's production style, I do want to talk about what I think is the ultimate star of this record, and that is Madlib's production on here. So I hold kind of a controversial opinion, and that is Madlib, for as much as I admire his work, is kind of hit and miss with me. Some of his his stuff I absolutely love. The aforementioned Beat Conductor Volume 5 and 6 I think is one of the most criminally under-celebrated records in Madlib's discography. And I think this record is as close as Madlib has ever come in sounding as inspired as he sounded on Madvillainy. I feel like this is easily some of Madlib's best production. It basically has everything that I think about when it comes to a Madlib project. So there's lots of soul chopping, there's lots of funny little skits, it hits hard when it wants to, it gets sloppy when it wants to, it's dirty, it's raw, it's everything that I look for in a Madlib project. And the one thing over the course of the 5 years since this record has been released is these beats still sound good to this day. I am still absolutely enamored with this record so much because Madlib's production is just so spot on this record. I would list highlights from it, but honestly, front to back, I love every single production on this record. And that says a lot because Madlib does occasionally miss with me, and that is not the case with this record. There's always consistently a new sound or texture on here that's always made me want to go back and listen to this record ever since I first picked it up. Some of my personal favorites definitely have to be Deeper, Heralds. One standout track for me, Shitsville, has one of, I think, Madlib's absolute craziest beats. I love the synths and the drums on it, making it sound like a kind of like a hip-hop horror movie. I absolutely love that track, and that's one of my favorite songs on here. But my real favorite #1 track from this record that really honestly made me get excited for this record was Thuggin'. I think that might have been the first single from this record. Honestly, I think the sort of rising tension, there's a certain gritty funkiness to that track, and ultimately, it's what I feel is probably the closest Madlib has ever come to creating sort of an epic hip-hop track in his whole discography. But like I've already stated at length, this whole record is nothing but highlights. And for that reason alone, I recommend that you check this out. And if you're not a fan of Freddie Gibbs as a rapper, you can still pick up Madlib's Pinata Instrumentals, which is also available. And that's a record, actually, I've considered picking it up for the longest time. But the thing is, at the end of the day, I think Freddie Gibbs is an excellent rapper. I think he flows over Madlib's beats perfectly. He brings the right amount of energy to every one of these tracks. Some of them he's a little bit more pulled back, a little bit more reserved, a little bit more mellow. And then on the tracks where he needs to be, like the aforementioned Thuggin' track, he comes in aggressive and hard, changing his flow as an inflection. And he really does a great job of matching the tone of the beats on this record. One of the common criticisms that I hear about Freddie Gibbs is he's not really that interesting of a lyricist, and I kind of disagree with that. Sure, he's sort of exploring the well-worn territory of the gangsta lifestyle, but I really like Freddie Gibbs's non-apologetic, just completely unabashed approach to gangster lyrics. It's completely unapologetic, un-PC, it's vivid. I like the fact that his approach to lyrics is basically the equivalent of a sledgehammer, and I really appreciate that. Some of Freddie Gibbs's punchlines are absolutely top-notch, and there's still some wordplay on this record that I still catch every time that I go back to this record. That being said, I do have one criticism, and that is the middle of this record for me. Not so much in the beat territory, but in Freddie Gibbs's performance really drags in the middle. From basically Thugging onward, Real, Uno just really don't do anything for me. I don't know if it's really the energy or the lyrical content. I just feel like these tracks just don't really resonate with me and really slow the record down for me. Now, it's brought up again by the absolutely excellent Robes, but then again, it slows down one more time from the tracks Robes onward. Broken and Lakers, I'm just honestly not a fan of for the exact same reasons that I mentioned about Uno and Real. Luckily, it picks up again with Nyx, one of my favorite tracks, Moving moving into Shame, which was another single that really sold me on this record. I love the sort of juxtaposition of some sort of sweet soul and Freddie Gibbs's sort of playa lifestyle. The music video for that song is also excellent. And then the record finishes on an absolute epic track, Pinata, which I played at the beginning of this video, and that is, honest to God, my favorite track from this record. The energy that not only Madlib brings with this string-laden sample, to the hard-hitting fills that break up the track, to the performances of all of the guest rappers on this track, including Freddie Gibbs himself. Like, everything about this track is why I love this record. I honestly think that's the centerpiece track on this record, and it is absolutely one of my favorite songs. Honestly, I think I've blabbed on far long enough for this record. If you already listened to this record, you already know that it's great. If you haven't listened to this record, what are you waiting for? Run out, pick this up. Easily one of my favorite Madlib records, one of my favorite Freddie Gibbs releases. Really looking forward to checking out Bandana. If you've listened to Bandana and you haven't checked this one out yet, definitely give Pinata a listen. So that's going to be it for me today, guys. Thanks as always for watching. If you've listened to this record, let me know what you thought about it down in the comments. If you want to hear tracks from this record, please head over to my WordPress or Steemit blogs, because that's where I'll be posting audio links to any of the records that I talk about on this channel. Also, please head over to my Mixcloud so you can check out Raw Select Radio, basically the audio component of this Raw Select music thing. There you can hear records that I talk about on this channel, as well as a lot of the records that I don't get to talk about. So that's gonna be it for me today, guys. Thanks as always for watching, and I will catch you in the next video. So until then, peace out!